Yo, what's up? Welcome to another stream here on Free Will Photos. Today is going to be a lot of fun. I think we're going to look at some compositing. So I don't want to take too much time. I got a few slides to get us started, and then we're going to jump right into the live demo. So let me go ahead and move us over to the computer. So today we're going to be talking about some compositing of images. It shouldn't be too, shouldn't be too crazy overall. I got to figure out which camera I'm looking at, so apologize for that. So here's the deal. Every stream that I do, I'm going to have a question that I'm just going to ask, and you drop it down in the comment section below what you think. So the question of today's stream is, have you ever composited an image prior to, hopefully by the end of this, you'll be inspired to go and composite some images. But if you've ever composited an image, let me know in the comment section below, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on tonight. Now, some of you may be asking, Chris, what in the world is compositing? And this is by no means the definitive answer, but this is probably the simplest way of explaining compositing when we talk about photo editing, at least. And it's blending two elements or two images together into a single image. All right. That's the simplest part, is blending two elements together into a single image. That's the easiest way of doing it. All right. Or explaining it. And if you look over on the right hand side of this particular slide, you'll see that there's a pink square and then there's a yellow square. And then at the very bottom, you have a pink and a yellow rectangle that's in the same square. So that's essentially taking the pink square and the yellow square, combining it. It's the easiest way that I can explain it, but it's going to make sense as we start to go through the description or the example that I have tonight. So I do have a few announcements. The first one, if you're not already, become a member of the Free Will Photos community. You can do that completely for free. Go over to the Free Will Photos website, www.freewillphotos.com, and just sign up to join the free community. Now, there is a link in the description box below, so you should be able to just click on that and then join the community that way once you get to the website. The second thing, I'm working on a lot of presets and I'm working on a lot of stuff, but what I need is people to help me test out these presets, to test out the LUTs, the texture packs that I'm putting together, things of that sort. And I am limiting this to just 20 people. But I have not hit that cap yet. So if you're interested in getting free presets that you can you keep them forever. I'm not going to ask for them back. So whatever you get from me as, a part of this program, you're just going to be able to have forever, and you can tweak to your heart's content, make it whatever you want. But what I need is a good group of people that are using ON1 Photo Raw, and they just want to test out some presets and give me feedback, so that way I know that I'm on the right track when I start creating these presets for users of ON1 Photo Raw. And then the last thing, I realized that tonight I'm using Boris FX to make a lot of the elements that I'm going to be using inside of ON1. And I don't want anyone to think that this is a sponsored broadcast or video or anything by Boris FX. It's not. I am an affiliate for ON1, so if you want to sign up for that, if you don't have it already, then you can check the description box below for the coupon code, and that will definitely help this channel, save you some money in the process. So now it is time to get into the fun stuff. And as I transition over, I'm just going to minimize that, and we're going to maximize this here. And I'm just going to check the comments real quick. I did sky swap in ON1 a few times, and a few times I made a collage with Photoshop and then Affinity. Okay, I see you, Sean. Yeah, those all count as composites. All right. Today, what we're going to be trying to recreate, if you've seen the thumbnail for this particular live stream or the video, I don't know what just happened there. ON1 does some stuff sometimes, and you close something out and it does that. But here's the deal. This is what we're going to try and recreate. What I was working on, or the original, is this image here. All right. And we're going to recreate this using Boris FX. Now, I'm going to go ahead and hit edit. We're going to jump into this editing process because I think that it just helps to get started. Now, most of you already know my computer sometimes does not like to cooperate with me when I do live streams. So if I have to restart a few times, then just bear with me as I go through that. But hopefully we can get going pretty good here. So here is the overall starting point. And I have some basic corrections. There's nothing crazy in here. I think, most of you would understand what these corrections are doing and how they work. And I don't think I have any effects. No, I don't. So I just did a very basic develop on a raw photo of a figurine that I don't actually have on my wall. I think this one is in a shoebox in the garage, but whatever. Let's go ahead and get started. So the very first thing that you want to do, and this works for any plugin, you come up to layer and you come down to filters, and then we're just going to select Boris FX. Again, not sponsored, just a great tool. And, if you want to try it, I think I also dropped a link to go and download a free trial. I did pay for this out of pocket. So it's definitely something that I wanted to pay for. All right. And we're letting this load up here. Just bear with me, getting notifications from other sources. Just want to make sure. Okay. All right. I got your message, Sean. That's what I was just checking right now. So what I did forget to mention, just backtracking for a quick second here. If you are interested in being a beta tester, all you have to do is go to freewillphotos.com, click on the contacts, send me a message to say you want to be a beta tester, and then I will add people to the group as that starts to grow. But Sean, you don't have to do that. As long as you're a member on the Free Will Photo site, I got you. I'm going to go ahead and add you into the group when I'm done with the stream. Okay, so I'm not going to make this the full size of the screen. And that's just because we're going to be in and out of Boris FX today. And this isn't necessarily going to be a tutorial on how to use Boris FX other than, but more so, I'm going to show you how Boris FX can be used to create these composite images. So the very first thing that you probably seen on the example is those lightning bolts. Well, if you come down to render inside of Boris FX, I use the Ultra Zap, and hopefully this is coming through pretty good on the stream. But we have a bunch of lightning bolts, and we can do all kinds of stuff with this. And I'm not going to spend too much time trying to make these perfect, because I could sit here all day trying to tweak this to make it perfect. And but what I want to do is wrap him in a lightning bolt, or in a series of lightning bolts, I should say. And over on the right-hand side here, we have the ability to add more bolts. So if I click this, now I got 2, now I got 3. Now, the way that I personally care to build up my composites is with individual bolts, because then I can really tweak this the way that I want that final result to look. So I'm just going to stretch this one out, pull it to about there, and I will add an additional bolt just to this one to make it go a little bit faster. Now, once I have that, what I'm going to do is come up here and add a new layer, and then I'm going to add Ultra Zap again. It's going to give me that exact same bolt that I started with, but I don't want that anymore. So down here where it says random speed, I can actually move this and it's going to give me a different look on the bolt. All right. And I'm just going to move this starting point to, we'll start just under his chin here. And if you guys don't know who this is Kid Flash or Wally West. I'm a huge Flash fan. So, shout out to the Flash. It's just my favorite comic book superhero. Let me know your comic book superhero if you got one in the comment section below, because, I think it's cool. Comics are fun. And we'll go a little bit more random. Maybe we'll do a few more bolts with this one. And I said I wanted to start it at his chin. This one, I think we'll start down over here and we'll manipulate it like this. Again, I could sit here all day and make this the way that I want it to be, but that wouldn't be very fun for everyone who is watching. So I'm going to do one more, probably right down underneath his feet. So add a layer. And we're going to do Ultra Zap again. I'm going to bring this right down to here. And that looked kind of cool too there. And then we'll come over here. Sean says, to a massive superhero fan, big DC fan, my favorite is Green Lantern. Hey, Green Lantern is legit. I can't knock Green Lantern. I don't know enough about his backstory, and the whole guild of lanterns and whatnot, but definitely respect Green Lantern. But if I had to choose my favorite character, it's definitely the Flash. All right, so I'm gonna leave this like so. In fact, I'm gonna fix this bolt over here. So I'm just gonna come back to, I think it was this one. I think so. Nope, it was probably this one. Nope. Sorry. There we go. And I'm just going to pull this off the screen out of the photo here. And yeah, I know I said that I wasn't going to spend a whole lot of time trying to fix these, but yeah, you could sit here all day. All right. So now that I have this, what I want to do is send this back to ON1 so I can actually start to build my composite. The issue, you could absolutely send it back to ON1 just like this, but I don't recommend that. Instead, what I recommend is creating, yet again, another new layer. And then I'm going to just call this black. And I'm going to drag this down right above to where it says original. All right. And then I'm going to come to color. And this will work with anything that you put onto a black background. So think about this as just an entry to how you can start to manipulate and build up composites. If it's on a black background, the technique that I'm going to show in today's lesson or live stream will work. So there is my lightning. Now, obviously, you can't see the actual the figurine that I'm molding this around, and that's okay. So I'm going to leave this like this on a black background with all of my lightning, and I'm okay with the colors of the lightning. I could have spent more time building up those colors, but I'm just going to go ahead and hit apply. And what this is going to do is send what we're looking at here on screen right into ON1 as its own layer. And I probably should have said, Okay, and there goes On1. Uh, this is the story of my life sometimes with On1. Okay, never mind. On1, it's still hanging in there. It's making the new layer. It was just on a different desktop. All right, struggles. All right, so now that we have the new layer, I'm just going to rename this bolts. And I can't spell. There we go. And then we're just going to hit the little gear icon here and hit screen. And this gives us the exact same composite look that we had when we were inside of Boris FX. All right. So if you have something that's on a black background, you can use the screen blend mode and it's going to get rid of the black and only leave the assets that are on top of it. All right, this is a very popular compositing technique, and I am by no means some advanced compositor. This is just something that I like to do from time to time. All right, so now we have our lightning bolts in here, and that looks pretty cool. Now, part of the flash and the story where they draw their speed from is called the speed force. All right, so the lightning, it makes sense. It does look a little odd right now. So what we're going to do is cover this with another layer. We're going to go back into Boris FX and we're going to make something similar to a LUT. And we're going to let this render, and I think I just made a boo-boo, but we'll see. Boo-boo is doctrinal term for a mistake. And I did. All right, so we're just going to hit no, and we're going to hit cancel on that. We're going to come back to On1. The mistake that I made is I have the bolts layer selected, and the Kid Flash figurine is nowhere on that layer. So I have two options whenever I get ready to go back to create a new layer inside of Boris FX. The first one is I can click on the layer down underneath, which is the actual figurine. If I turn off the bolts, you can see that this is the layer with the main subject or the figurine. So if you're doing this with a portrait, then your portrait, your subject, whatever, that's going to be down here. And the second thing that I could do is I can turn the bolts back on. And if I right click, or I'm sorry, I have to select the bolts layer. And then if I right click on the bolts layer, you can see I have the option for a new stamped layer. When I click that, and this is the way that I personally like to do it, unless I know that I'm just going to go and work off of the original figurine, is when you create a stamped layer, it's taking the bolt layer and the original layer and it's merging them into one, but it leaves the other two layers here for me to edit later on. So, and while this loads, I'm going to take a look at the comments because I see that we got a few. Sean says, I even commissioned a custom comic book cover with me on it and printed it up. Nice. There's so much stuff that we could do. That's pretty cool, Sean. And then Applewood J says, how did you manage to get Boris FX to open in On1? Mine always terminates when I try to launch it from On1. Okay, hey, that's a good question. Here's the deal. I am running, let me just minimize this for a second because I didn't cover that. And I need to go. Let's just open this up. I'm going to my applications. The short answer for you, Applewood, is I am using a M1 Mac, which allows me to choose if I want to run this in native M1 or if I want to run this in Rosetta. So If you go to, and for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, this is only a thing that applies to M1 Mac users. And this is how I was able to get it to run. Again, it's an out of process tool. But what you do is you right click on the icon for your particular program, and then you click on Get Info. And in the center of the box here, you'll see Open Using Rosetta. Right now, I'm using this in the Intel-based version of ON1 because every time that I tried to run this in the M1 native version, Boris FX, along with a few other plugins that I have, they wouldn't run. And ON1 has a full website of what they consider to run in operation. That's not the right terminology, but let's just say that it is. ON1 has a list of plugins that will work with the native in process. That's what it is, in process sequence. And then they have a list of plugins that either they're listed as not supported, which I don't know if Boris FX is on there. And then they have some that are listed as out of cycle or out of process. In process and out of process, you definitely have to do some testing. But as long as your Boris FX is installed as a plugin for Photoshop, this should work. It should, you know. I'm not tech support. It definitely is hit or miss sometimes, and I'm just thankful that ON1 is working with me today. So hopefully that answers your question, Applewood. And Sean says it's $175 a month for Boris. Oh, okay, so the $175 a month is for the suite. I paid $150 for the download. It's a one-time purchase. At least that's what I understand. I am not trying to sell this to anyone. I'm just showing it because I think that I have a lot of fun playing with this plugin, and I paid for this out of my own pocket. Again, no kickbacks. I'm not sponsored by them. I just like to share cool tools whenever I come across them. But yeah, if I'm not mistaken, that $175 a month is if you want to get the full suite. But if you only want Boris FX Optics, that should be, I want to say, $80 a year and $150 one-time purchase. But don't quote me on that. Definitely dig around on the website. Okay. Yeah, we'll take a look at that a little bit later. But let's get back to the composite here. So now that I have my stamp layer, all right, the top one is my stamp layer. I'm just going to rename it. What this is a composite. There's that word again. It's a composite or a collection of these two images stamped into one. So if I turn these off, you can see that I still have both of those layers still visible. All right. And now with the stamped layer selected, if I come back up to layer and then go to filter, Boris FX, and then Optics 2022, I will now see the figurine with the lightning bolts inside of Boris FX. And this is what I want to work with. And while this decides to load, come on, computer, stop jumping on me. Okay. So to answer your question, Sean, I just went ahead and jumped over And then Applewood said that he got it for 149 too. So I'm just going to share this really quickly. So if you go to their main website, you have to go to the optics, because that's the program that I'm actually demoing here. This one is developed for photographers, or for still images, at least I'll say it like that. You come to purchase options, and then I went to the new license option, and that's where I got the one-time price of $149. Now they do have a subscription model where you can either do, the $825 if you, or $99 for the entire year, or $9 a month. That's up to you. Again, not selling this, just sharing information, because I do appreciate the software. I'm having a good time using it. Okay. So now we have our image back inside of Boris FX. And this time what I want to do is create the Speed Force look, because that's what we were kind of talking about. And in order to do that, I think it's under diffusion. No, it's under, is it under lens? Nope. Sorry. I have to find the item that okay, it's under render. I'm still learning this program also. Probably should have led with that a little bit. And we're going to use caustics. That's what I think that says. And the one that I used in the demo is this Silky Sheets. Now, I didn't use the template by itself. Instead, what I did was I came over and I messed around with the focus rays. And again, I'm not going to waste too much time trying to make this look exactly like, I'm not going to try and make this look exactly like I did in the previous composite, but just to show you the idea. Now, what I will do is I will use my color picker, and I think I used a yellow the last time because I wanted to kind of match with what Wally West looks like here. And then I think I used his hand to get a red sample. That's too bright. It's a pink. So what I can do is come in here and use my color wheel and really hone this in. And I don't know how this works on a PC, but I demo this all the time. There is so much power inside of the colors window for the Mac, because if I go to my color sliders and I go to RGB, I can put a hex color in here. Now, I'm pretty confident that there is a way that you can put a hex color, and if you're not familiar with that, don't worry about it. All right. Just know that this is a way to reference a very specific color. So if you have a color palette and you want to reference that specific color from the palette, you can use that hex code and put that in there. But where I normally spend most of my time is just messing around with the color wheel here, and then just dialing it in until I get to a place where I'm like, okay, I like that. So I'm going to hit OK because I do like that. And this is just giving us that look of him being in the Speed Force. And, you know, it looks kind of cool if you ask me. And I can even up the frequency, which I would not do on this particular image. I like the simplicity, and I can move the speed so it looks different. So I'll find something, and maybe that looks pretty good, we'll say. And now I'm done with this, but I need to do my trick of adding a new layer, going to color, hitting color, choosing black, and then moving this underneath, and then coming back up here to the top. And now I have my red background only. And this actually looks like something that's in the poster of the Flash. So when I hit apply, I'm sending just this back into ON1, which, don't worry, ON1 didn't quit on me. I just have to jump over to it using my keyboard shortcuts there, and we'll let that think while I get some water. And then just looking at the comments here, Applewood J says that there's discounts to be found. Yeah, hey, if you find one, please come and share it here on the channel. Again, not sponsored, just trying to share a cool a cool thing with the community. All right, so now that I have my layer back in here, and I'm just going to call this Speed Force. It's always a good idea to label your layers so that way you know what you're doing. And then I'm just going to hit the little gear icon and click on screen. Sorry, I jumped over it. And for me, this looks a little too aggressive, right? So now I can work with this just like a normal layer inside of ON1. So if I think like, hey, you know what, this should be a little bit darker, I can start to lower the exposure. And it's like, okay, that's coming through pretty good. I don't think there was any blacks in there. Otherwise, it wouldn't have shown through. So I'm not going to worry about that. And what I can then come over here and do is I can also manage the opacity, right? So I can pull this down and I can say, all right, how do I want to make this look? Now, I'm going to bring up the exposure just a little bit more because I do want that to be a little bit more red. But what I can also do is come over to the vibrance, and I can really mess with that, mess with the saturation. And if I really, really wanted to tie this in, I can come into effects, add a filter after it does its analyzing. Okay. That Sean asked a really good question here. Let me go ahead and bring that up. It says, why not make all your layers at once in Boris FX rather than going back and forth multiple times? I like this question, and the reason for that, I'll answer it first, and then I'll explain it a little bit better, or a little bit more in depth. So the reason why I make separate layers each time and make different instances of going into Boris FX is I like to work with individual layers, and I like to build those layers up for the reason that I can independently work right now if I wanted to. I can or not if I wanted to, because I could just turn that off, and now I can build up my composite and independently work on each one of these layers without having to worry about manipulating colors in a different layer. So for instance, if I went with the desert preset over here, which that didn't really do much of anything. Let's see if we can. So I'm just pulling up the red, all right? Let's say that I had red in my lightning bolts. If I created all of them on one layer, that would essentially be the same as this stamped layer. And in fact, I'll go ahead and make that real quick. So I am going to bring that to the top for a second. Just bear with me, because this will make sense. So, or actually, it needs to be underneath. All right. And then I'll right click on this top layer and hit new stamped layer. All right. And this is now taking all of these layers that have the little circle checked and turning them into a single layer. And this would essentially be if I went into Boris FX and I made the lightning bolts on one, or lightning bolts and the Speed Force, or the red overlay in one instance of a layer, That's essentially what this new stamp layer would represent. And when I go to make modifications, I'm going to run into the issue of manipulating the colors of the entire image as opposed to being able to manipulate the colors or the exposure, or in some cases, you may even want to add a texture that is specific to that particular layer. So when you go to blend it later on down the line, you just get more flexibility. I guess I could shorten my answer. You can get more flexibility when you do it on individual layers than if you were to make it all in one layer together. I hope that answered your question, Sean. Oh, I, I gotta like pay attention to the comments. The challenge of live streaming is you get so caught up in dealing with what you're trying to do, and but Sean says, and my question is answered. Said that before I even gave that long definition. So there's that. Let's see. Andres says, "Hey Will, any advice to make ON1 run faster? I can get laggy, or it can get laggy for me when browsing through the adaptive presets, and also after around an hour of editing." He's on an i5, 12 gigabytes of RAM, NVIDIA Force GeForce card. Also browsing from picture to picture. Can get laggy, especially if no noise has been applied. Thanks. ON1 is great for me, except for the performance. Yeah, that's a tough question. And the reason why that's tough for me to answer is I'm very familiar with getting the performance to work good on a Mac computer, and specifically on an M1, which the real response there is understanding what you're trying to accomplish, and if you need to be in native M1 or native Silicon, or if you need to revert it to the Intel version, like I am today, using the Intel version to accomplish this. I'm not entirely sure. I don't have any good suggestions because I don't have a PC that I really run ON1. But if anyone in the comments knows of a way, please share it, because I don't want to make it. I definitely don't have a good answer for you, unfortunately. And then Applewood says you can save 20% by using Jim Nix Optics 22. I'll just go ahead and put that up. There you go. So if you are looking to pick up Optics 2022, there is a good code, and Applewood is not affiliated with Jim Nix. So if you do use it, you're helping out Jim. I know of Jim. I think he's a great guy, great contributor to the community here on YouTube. So there you go. Also find browser slow. Okay. I think that ON1 has issues with stability in 2023 version. So Sean is saying he thinks that ON1 has stability. I can definitely attest to the fact that ON1 is not the most stable for me. But let's get back to the composite. I get wrapped up in the comments there, but I'd really appreciate the conversation, guys. So this, I know that I already answered the question, but I just want to demonstrate it. So if I were to add a filter here, and it's thinking, I'm on the Speed Force layer that is a composite of all 4 of these layers. Okay. So if I was to create the layer, my dog's being weird. Stop. If I was to create the layer in all of the effects on one instance of the Boris FX, then this is essentially what would happen. So I'm going to hit color enhancer. And when I get that, if I were to desaturate the red, that's taking the red out of the entire image. I may not want to do that. So that's the reason why I recommend having it on separate layers, as you see that I have here. So if you want to build it up, and I'm just going to delete this so I can save some processing power, since I am streaming and running Boris FX at the same time. So that way, if I wanted to, run if I wanted to modify the reds of this particular layer, I have that ability, and it's going to modify it independent of the other layers. Now, what I do need to do, I'm going to go ahead and turn this off, and I probably should have kept that other layer, but I know that I don't want the red to be all over his face, okay? So I'm going to use a layer mask on the actual layer. I'm not in the effects. I'm actually on the layer. And I'm going to go with a fairly large brush, paint out, and I'm just going to bring the opacity down probably to about 40. There's no rhyme or reason to the real number. I'm at 37. I just don't want the red to be all over his face. So I'm just going to paint that away from his face area. All right. That way, you can do this however you want, or whatever you think makes the most sense. And I think that that's going to work that way. And then the next thing that I want to do, I'm going to go ahead and close that layer mask. I need to mask in how I want these lightning bolts to kind of interact with him. Okay. And this is where I can mask the lightning bolts in and out, just like you could do with any other masking capability. And so what I'm going to do is just paint out, and I need to go to 100%. And I'm just going to paint this away like so. And I'm using a pretty good feathered brush, so it looks natural for the fall off. All right. And I'm just going to get rid of some of those down here. And this is how you can just really reshape the lightning bolts, because I'm using a mask. And this is the other benefit of having them on separate layers. If I had all of this on one layer, I would literally be masking everything out at once. And I don't necessarily want to do that. You may. I don't usually. I like, at least when I'm building composites, I like to build in layers. And I like to stack the things that I want to stack for my own editing style. So now that I have all of my layers kind of the way that I want it to be, and I'm ready to move into the next phase of the edit. So I'm going to come back to the Speed Force layer. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to hit New Stamped Layer. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to apply a blur to the entire image. And that's what's going to give us that look of him running and moving. And when you add a little bit of a motion blur, it gives that aesthetic. And that's what I want to do right now, is I want to give that motion blur aesthetic, so we can really see, the effect happening here. And usually it doesn't take this long for me to make these merge layers, but because I'm streaming, my computer, it's a Mac Mini with 16 gigabytes of RAM, and it's on an M1 chip with a 1 terabyte hard drive. I thought that that would be more than enough, but if I have not learned anything, is that is not enough. It's just not enough, or at least the performance wise doesn't make it enough. So while we wait for this, I'll go to the comments. All right, already read Sean's comment about the stability. Andrea says, "Hey Sean, I have ON1 22. It's running significantly faster for me than 2023. Really excited that 2023 has smart masking. Thanks for the reply." Well, yeah, no worries. Okay. And, I really enjoyed ON1 2022. What I will say about 23 versus 22 is I've experienced less crashes on the 2023 version than I have on the 2022 version. Sean says, yeah, 2022 is very stable and fast. 23 has awesome features, but it's slow and laggy for me when the browse module. Yeah, I have that issue, especially when it comes to searching images. The lagginess is a real deal. More RAM and a better GPU will probably help out. Yeah, I can't get any more RAM on my computer, and the GPU is built into the M1. There's no more modification for me. I bought the highest spec'd out version of the Mac Mini that I could afford, and yeah, it works, right? I'm not complaining. Most of the time, I'm just chilling when I'm doing my photo edits. All right, so now I have my stamped layer, and I am going to label this final blur, or I'm gonna just label it final. All right. And now this is where we can start to add in the effects that we want to from ON1. And this is where we can really start to shape this and make it a little bit more of a familiar editing session. So once this gets done analyzing, we should be able to start throwing in some blurs, because I do want to add a motion blur. And that is underneath blur. And then I'm going to change this from Gaussian. And you could get away with a Gaussian blur. I personally think that motion is a little bit more fun, at least for me. And I just pull the distance until you could see like how his eyes are starting to move. To me, that just looks really cool. But don't worry. This is not the final look. And then you could play with the angle. I had made all of the lightning bolts kind of go in the exact same direction as he's moving. And then you can smooth it out a little bit, but I would be careful with smoothing it out too much. And I don't want the lightning bolts to lose their shape all that much. So I'm going to pull back on the distance for that, so you could still see that these are lightning bolts, all right, and not just like some random scratches all over the screen here. So now what I'm going to do is I am going to mask this out, and I want to mask it away from the area that I was focused on when I took the photo, and that is his eyes. So I'm just going to mask that away. And now we can see the area, and you know what? I may even, I'm gonna bring the opacity down. We'll bring it down to about 30, and we'll paint this in a little bit over his eye, so it doesn't look like we, just froze him in time, right? Now we have this look, and if I turn the blur off and on, you could just see how it really does make this whole composite start to come together. And this is what, when I teach anyone how to composite, or when I play around with composites, is I build up all of my elements, and then I find a way to really compress them and merge them together to make it make sense for the viewer. Because it just looks like we stacked a bunch of stuff on top of an image, which is essentially what we did. But this makes it look like a cohesive thing, like this was actually happening in the image. And it makes it feel a little bit more alive. And, you know, you can tell like, okay, he's running. And even if you didn't get that he was a superhero, you would at least understand like there's something happening with motion where he's moving. So that's the reason why you want to do that, or at least I recommend it. The next thing that I want to do is add a little bit of mist, and I do that with the weather filter. So we're going to add a weather filter, and you could put this over the blur or under the blur. It doesn't really matter, except for the larger your mist becomes, the more the blur is going to affect it. So for me, I'm putting the weather after the blur because I don't want the blur to really affect my mist. All right. So I go to this little drop down, and then I go to not bottom two or bottom third slow. There we go. All right. And I'll just go ahead and pull up on the fog, and Sean says it's time for a before and after, and I will absolutely show that here in 1 second. In fact, I'll do it like this. All right. So this is with the fog, and I haven't fine-tuned the fog just yet because now it just looks like a pink mist is all over the image. But this is what we started with. And I intentionally shot this at a shallow depth of field at f2, and I was really close with my 35mm RF lens. So this is where I was focused, somewhere in this area on the eye, and all of this was out of focus because I knew that I wanted this to look like he's moving, and when something's moving fast, there's some blur to it. So that was the before. And then we added in some lightning bolts, and then we added in a red overlay to really sell the effect that he's inside of the Speed Force, which is what the speedsters in the DC universe use, except for the reverse flash. Just fun facts there. And then we have the final image where there's this motion blur, as well as a little bit of a weather look. Now, you can make this work however you want it to work for you. And there's a lot of different ways that you could really hone in on the weather. Thought my dog was over here talking in his sleep or whatever, making sounds. I'm not going to go into crazy detail on this, other than the fact that you may want to use the masking bug. I personally like to tailor some of my my additions, if you will. And I'll just pull that up a little bit. And, you know, that would be the end there. And then we can even add in a vignette. And I usually go with a big softy. And now that really just, you know, focuses us in on the fact that there's this action hero that's moving around, potentially giving the illusion of moving fast. And, you know, it's just a composite. So, again, here is the before, and here is the final image. Now, I don't believe that it is exactly the same, as I hardly ever can recreate something that I've made previously. Like this one's brighter compared to this one. Actually, let me hit done. We're going to go to the notorious, or the browse module, and this is saving the final version of this particular image as a .on1 or .photo file. What that means is ON1 is saving this to its proprietary or its version of a editable, because most of what we did is non-destructive, right? I worked in a very non-destructive manner, which is the other reason why I get separate layers. I like to work non-destructively. It gives me way more flexibility later on down the line when I'm like, hey, you know what? I want to go back and change this thing. Now I have that layer. If I don't like the lightning bolts, I can go do that. I am going to do that. I just need to let this save because I'm going to bring up both of the compare, or I'm sorry, both of the images in the compare mode, but it's trying to render out all of these separate layers so they can be recalled later. So just bear with me for a second here and we will get those up. But yeah, hopefully, you guys found this particular tutorial or live stream value added, because the goal here is really just to share the knowledge and, have a community around. You guys share information with one another as well, letting each other know like, hey, this is what you can do to make ON1 work better. That's the goal, the intent. And man, this is moving slow. So while this decides to continue moving, if you got questions, please drop them into the comment section now. Paying attention to the comments. I see Sean has a few. He says, excellent tutorial. I really appreciate that, Sean. Yeah, no, I really do. And Sean himself also does videos on ON1. So, check his channel out, check out his videos. I think that everyone has something to contribute. And it's always, to me, it's a blessing to see more people using ON1, because as honest as I am about my frustrations with the software, I truly do use ON1 as my 90%. Like, most of my edits are done 100% inside of ON1. The only time that I leave ON1 is if there's a tool or a feature that doesn't exist in ON1, or I don't believe that it works the best for the edit. All right. That's not me knocking ON1. That's just me being honest. All right. It's not me knocking this system, because I think ON1 is great. I really do enjoy using it. All right. Now that has loaded, if I can select this one, then we'll go to the compare. And you'll see that they don't look the exact same, and that's okay. I put more lightning. Well, you don't see anything right now because ON1 is straight tripping. The struggles that I have with this system. All right, well, maybe I can get one of them to just pop up. I can't even get this one to come up. Oh, that's so disappointing. Yeah. Hey, this is what happens when I use ON1, and, it doesn't really, you know what? Here's what we'll do. We'll just make them bigger like this. Because you can see this is the edit that we made today. This one over here on the left. And this is the edit that I made yesterday when I was just messing around. The Speed Force particles are even different compared to the Speed Force particles that I made today. And you can see that I even underexposed his face a little bit to make it a little bit more dramatic. This one looks more heroic and, like positive vibes. This one looks more dramatic and the world's about to end type, I need to hurry up. Like they have different feels to them, right? And this is just all a part of what I hope to teach this year in photo editing and compositing using ON1. So you can use your particular photos to convey a story and create some surreal type stuff like this, or create something that may be a little bit more dramatic like this photo, which this is actually straight out of camera. So that's a fun fact for you. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. So let me go ahead and reduce the sizes here. So yes, I will absolutely share the final versions. I'm going to share the final versions on Vero, and I'll even have the original version, the base raw file. So you'll be able to see the different versions and the progression. So yes, thank you for that suggestion, Sean. And it is always my pleasure for the shout outs because, we are a team, right? That's at least how I see it. We all use the program and we're just trying to draw awareness and teach people how to use it. So let's jump back over here. So we've already done the demo, which is great. So now I'm here for any questions. And if you don't have any, don't feel like you have to come up with any. That's perfectly fine. Dinner call, signing off. Hey, thank you for hanging out, Sean. I really do appreciate that. Yeah, we're just over an hour, so I'm about to hop off too. And I'll catch you on the next stream. All right. Now, for everyone else, if you got questions, drop them in the comments. If not, that's okay. If you are watching the restream, and let me just go ahead and go. I got to come over here because there it is. Boom. Eventually, it should change. There we go. So if you're watching the restream, then go ahead and leave the comments down in the comment section below. I will get to those comments because I do read them, and I appreciate everyone who leaves a comment down there. Now, if you are looking to get ON1 Photo Raw, then what I would recommend you doing is potentially checking out the ON1 website, and you can use Freewheel Photos 20 to get a copy of that. And I do a lot of videos here on the channel that help people learn how to use photo editing software like ON1. Now, I do have a live stream that's set up for this Friday as well. That should be getting posted probably later tonight or tomorrow morning. And I'm going to be teaching dodging and burning specifically inside of ON1 Photo Raw and how you can use the different methods to dodge and burn. And if you don't know what that is, that's okay. That's the point of these lessons. I'm going to teach it. You can bring questions or you can drop them in the comment section below. And, I always appreciate anyone who wants to and can hang out. So here's what I'll say. Until next time, I want you guys to stay inspired and keep creating. Peace.